Are you ready to take on the new year? New years come with new beginnings, and as you probably know, New Year's resolutions. You've also probably heard the sobering statistics like 90% of people give up on their New Year's resolution after just a few short weeks. So the question is, how can you not be just another statistic? Welcome to Change Made Easy. Changing your habits, routines, and behaviors is hard. We make it easy. I'm Paul Levitin. I help anyone who's stuck, stagnant, or feeling burned out in life to create positive change in ways that stick forever. It's that easy. According to Forbes, fully 80% of Americans commit to making New Year's resolutions each year. But a year later, less than 1% report sticking to those resolutions. That's pretty hopeless. In my years helping people create lasting change, one of the things I've seen get in people's way the most from creating that lasting change, whether it's a New Year's resolution or just a regular goal, is making change and goal setting too big, too overwhelming. And that's why today I'm talking with Clint Callahan. Clint is the creator of the Small Changes, Big Impact system of life change. Clint is a therapist and a life coach, and he has spent over 20 years helping people create real, sustainable life change. In this episode, Clint and I discuss the true definition of burnout and why it's not just about what's going on at your job, how to think about goal setting in the new year and beyond, and Clint gives a simple strategy that you can use in just 15 minutes a day to de-stress and re-motivate yourself towards your goals. I promise you that if you implement the strategies discussed in this episode, it will make you 10 times more likely to stick to your resolutions. And with that, let's dig in with Clint Callahan. Can you explain to me the small changes, big impact, 1% per day transformational system?
Sure, I'm more than happy to. So the small changes, big impact system is designed to help you look at your life in smaller incremental chunks, because what we found in just through years of just me doing psychology and working with different people is that when you try to make big changes, you have to start small. Because when you look at the big overall picture, like let's say the easiest thing to think about is like when you're climbing a mountain. If you're at the bottom of the mountain and you're looking at the top of the mountain, you're basically like, I'm already tired. That is really far up there. I will never get there. I don't even know if I want to do this. I'm already tired just thinking about what I have to do to get to this mountaintop. And that's how we as a society, especially in America, have been taught to visualize our goals, to look at it from look at the top of the mountain. What do you want first? And then work your way backwards down to the base of how you're going to make it. But for most of us, we get stuck because it seems so far away. Like if I'm like, okay, I want to be a billionaire, right? That's an easy thing to think about. Right? Who wouldn't want to be a billionaire? But what do I have to do that? Well, then you have to break that down and break that down and break that down and break that down. So first you need like probably $1 billion idea. Okay, so how do you come up with $1 billion idea? Well, you go and look around a marketplace and go, okay, where's a hole that I can find that if I fill this space, it could potentially create $1 billion idea. But then we also know, if you look at any of the billionaires that are out in the world today, they're super diversified, right? They're not just, they started with one thing and then that thing turned into like 15 to 20 different things that created this $1 billion idea. But that's the thing. It's always these small changes that you do over time that will let you get to the larger goal. But we do it wrong because we think, again, we basically, the way we do goal setting is basically, what do I want to have and what do I need to do to have that so I can become the thing that I want to be once I have all the stuff. But it actually needs to be the reverse. It needs to be, who do I need to be in order to do the things that are necessary to have the thing that I want? Because the biggest problem that I see with a lot of people when I work with them is that when they reach these goals, then there's this cliff after the goal where they feel completely empty, where they feel like they didn't get what they wanted out of it because they didn't see this big, bright light, this thing that let them know, oh, I've made it. And so that's what this process is all about. It's about helping you to redefine the way you structure and set your life and create, if you want to make emotional changes, mental changes, if you want to make physical changes, any kind of changes require small, slow and steady wins the race kind of philosophy. It is that.
I love all of that and couldn't agree more, especially timely as we're recording this on January 2nd. New Year's resolutions are in the air. And
Yes.
I call this the New Year's resolution effect, where it's like, what does everyone want to do January 1st? Like, well, I'm going to eat better. I'm going to exercise more. I'm going to stop smoking. I'm going to stop drinking alcohol. And I'm going to start reading more. I'm going to start sleeping 8 hours. And it's like, you're doing too much. You're drinking through a fire hose is the expression that I like. And
Yes.
that's why so many people find themselves stuck or falling off of their New Year's resolution so quickly. And yet I've also found that, as you said, to use your mountain analogy, if we only look at the peak of the mountain, it's overwhelming. But also if we only think about taking one step, some people feel like, well, how am I ever going to climb the mountain that way? They feel like they need that big insurmountable goal to look towards. So is it possible to set goals that are too small?
It is possible to set goals that are too small, but that's why the way I tend to use, I love the mountain analogy because it's just, everyone has an idea of what it's like to climb a mountain. And so what I usually tell people, so then what you need to do is you need to figure out, so when you design your goal, it needs to be a couple of different things. So you need to have, yes, you need to have the larger overall goal. Where do you want to be? What's the big thing you want to do? Yes, you need that. But then you also need to figure out, what are these base camps, these smaller goals, the medium term goals that you can do as you're climbing this mountain. And then the smaller goals are that. So really you look at it from a 15-minute perspective. So this is what you can do daily. And then you add up all the dailies, and that equals then the weekly. And then you add up all the weeklies, and that equals the monthly. And then you add up all the monthlies, and that equals quarterly, yearly, all these different things. But that's how you create a goal system that you can follow. But also the other part that people also need to put into their goals, which most people are like, why would you put that in a goal, is you need to put in setbacks, failures, times when you're just like, I don't want to do this today. You need to add those in, because if you build in setbacks and failures into your goal, then that's a part of the goal. So then you're more likely to continue with the goal, because you remind yourself, oh, I was able to do this 25 out of 30 times this month. Wow. But I didn't do it for 5 days. So for most, we're like, well, I didn't do it the whole time, so therefore I failed. But if you build in, cheat days, like if you use a dieting example, or when you're working out and you're trying to do a very specific routine, they build in cheat days for that very reason. Because if you don't create cheat days or moments of when you're like, I just don't want to do this, I'm just tired, I just need a day off. If you don't build these into your goals, then that is what derails you most of the time. Because in our brain, we like to think, oh, it's a straight line. It's A to B. It's a straight trending line upward. I'll get to the goal. It's no problem. It's not up and down. It's just a straight line. And that's the problem, is that it's not. It's always up and down. So it's building in the ups and downs into the goal, so that allows you to get where you want to be, while also recognizing that you're human. And you're going to be fallible, and you're going to make mistakes, and there's going to be days when you're like, I don't want to do this. And then give yourself permission to just not, as long as you can then start up again the next day. And that's one of the hardest things to do, is to, well, if I stop in the middle of a goal, then why would I start again? Well, because if it's built into your goal that you can stop for a 24-hour period and then start up again, then that is still part of the goal. So you're still in your goal. And that's the mindset change you need to have when it comes to setting goals.
Hey, real quick, we'll be back to the show in just a few seconds, but right now I just have to tell you about my free weekly newsletter. If you want to join the thousands of change seekers just like you, who get a curated list each week of 5 educational, informative, and inspiring pieces of content to help you on your quest for change, then click the link in the notes that says free newsletter right now. You'll get signed up for free tips that will make your change journey easier, sent straight to your inbox every Friday. All you have to do is click free newsletter in whatever app you're listening on. Okay, now back to the show. Very great insight there. I love the analogy of the base camp adding to the mountain climbing analogy, and having those small, I call low-hanging fruit goals, the small daily and weekly action step goals. That's what this podcast is all about, is actual action steps. I
Mm-hmm.
just released an episode about enthusiasm. And the whole point was that we have to be enthusiastic, not about the goal, because everyone can get
Mm-hmm.
enthusiastic about reaching the top of the mountain. It's
Yes.
can you get enthusiastic about the small action steps that will take you there? Because that's what you have to do every day. It's
Yeah.
not lose 100 pounds. It's
No.
the daily action steps of the eating and the exercise and the
Yeah.
whatever else
And
that.
that's where the burnout comes into play, because that's the other thing that people think about. When people think about burnout, they think about burnout is as a work thing. Oh, I'm burned out because I work too much, and that's not what burnout is. What burnout is a small systematic erosion of your ability to have that enthusiasm daily. It's your ability to continue that momentum, because when you do a goal and you can't, and the hard thing for human beings, and this is one of the things that I love about being a life coach and about being a therapist, is part of my job is to say, look how far you've come. And when I usually say, okay, a month ago, you came to me with this. This is the way you were living your life. Now, look at the way you've shifted and changed. Look at these things that you've done. And most people are like, I didn't even think about that, because you don't, because you're living it every day. So for you, it becomes this new routine, this new thing that you're doing. But we rarely take that step back and look and go, wow, a month ago, when I would have said this thing or done this thing, it would have triggered this kind of spiral and I would have completely been off the rails. But now I said this thing and did this thing, but instead of it triggering me and making me go off the rails, I recognized it for what it is. I gave myself some time to take a break, and I was able to get back on and start again, and it was okay. And that's the thing that really is the most important thing when it comes to also goal setting, is celebrating even the small achievements, celebrating that you made it for a whole month. If you're trying to stop drinking alcohol and you actually have an alcohol problem, just stopping drinking one time is a win. Just stopping using one time is a win for either drinking, any kind of addiction. And addiction is the thing about addiction is that people look at it as, oh, it has to be these hardcore things. But addiction at its purest form is this something that gets in your way and derails you from achieving your goals? Because think about it. Your phone is the best example ever. It's literally designed to trigger the things in your brain that make you want to use it. If that is an addiction, I don't know what is.
I totally agree. My phone is my biggest addiction, and it's something that I'm always trying to fight. I have different apps and different
Mm-hmm.
things, and I leave it in different rooms and all these different things, and it's still hard for me. I feel myself touch it when I'm just like, it gives me comfort. I hate it
Yeah.
the most out of it that I hate anything else.
Yeah.
But I want to come back to what you were saying there
Mm-hmm.
for a second about burnout. I'm glad that you brought
Sure.
that up, because I know that burnout is something that you teach a lot
Mm-hmm.
about. And I'm curious, what got you so interested specifically in the topic of burnout?
I was burned out profoundly about 14, 15 years ago. So my mom committed suicide, and that basically triggered a major grief spiral, which then triggered me to leave being a therapist for several years. And then I was a real estate agent for a while, and then 2008 happened and we lost everything. And so I was profoundly burned out at that point, because I was grieving, I was lost, I was exhausted, I was distancing myself from my family, I was distancing myself from just myself. I was doing all the things that were profoundly just, I didn't deserve to be here. It wasn't depression. This was burnout. This was a level above depression. I think burnout is deeper than depression, because burnout is a systemic thing. It's not just that, oh, I'm just tired every day about work. It's no, I distanced myself from my family. I distanced myself from just my own personal care. I distanced myself from just even caring about work. You just separate yourself from literally all the domains in your life. And that's why I got into burnout, because I've been there and I battled through it and I figured out my way out. And it was using this 15-minute a day system, because I had also had a newborn at that time, and I had to decide for myself, what kind of father did I want to be? What kind of husband did I want to be? What kind of man did I want to be when I was in the depth of my burnout? Because I wasn't being a good father. I wasn't being a good husband. I wasn't being just a good human. I was just a shell. And it's one of those things that once you recognize that you have two choices. Like most things, you either do something about it or you don't. And I decided to do something about it, and it was a long struggle to get out of, but it's made me a better person and a better therapist and a better husband and a better father and all those things because I faced it. And it's one of the hardest things to do with any kind of challenge that you have against you, is turning and facing it. Because let's face it, society has trained us and taught us that it's better to disassociate, disconnect, deflect, deny, cover things up with humor, with alcohol, with drugs, with TV, with whatever, to not face it.
It's interesting. One, thank you for sharing that story about your mother and your own struggles. I always love when professionals, therapists, coaches, entrepreneurs, people who are quote unquote successful by outward metrics come and share the downs of their life. Because as you said, it's not just a straight arrow up. Everyone struggles. Even someone who's been a therapist for 20 years struggles with their own stuff. So I appreciate you sharing that. But I'm interested, this is a question that I've been asking myself for a bit lately. It's like what you just said of, okay, I was basically at rock bottom, as they say, right? I had I had a kid, I was,
and I bounced a couple times.
Right. And you bounced a couple times. But my question is it easier to bounce back from rock bottom than it is for someone who hasn't, someone who just wants to be a little bit healthier, someone who wants to be just a little bit better because they don't have that, like you said, do or die decision to make?
No, because it still comes back to the same fundamental choice. Rock bottom, yes. So rock bottom in one way, yes, it can help force you, because you can either do two things. You can either try and dig deeper, or you can decide to start to climb out. But even when it's just your daily, everyday life and you're just trying to make these changes, the mentality and the modality is still the same. It's still you deciding to turn towards this thing that you've been denying, deflecting, hiding from, whatever it is, and turning towards it saying, okay, why am I doing this? What is this giving me? And is this something I still need? Or is this just a habit that I've been in for so long that I think I need it? And it's one of the most difficult things to do, because all human beings are, if you really look at it, is we are the story we tell ourselves about why we do what we do. And our story is not just from us internally. It comes from parents, teachers, every relationship, every interaction, everything that you've gone through, what society says, all these different things create this story that's constantly running in your head that's telling you, this is why I do this. This is why I act this way. This is why I don't do this. All these different things. And so the first part that I always tell people to do is, when you're beginning to start this process, the first thing is, I love teaching people mindfulness. And the most simple technique for mindfulness that I teach people is what I call my emotional management plan. And what it is our emotions are constantly bombarding us every day, because that's the fuel that runs us. And so what we do is we stop and we do a specific breathing technique called box breathing. And what box breathing is you breathe in for 4 and hold, you breathe out for 4 and hold, breathe back in for 4 and hold, so on and so forth. And do that 4 different times. And so it creates this box breathing. And what that does is it turns off your parasympathetic nervous system, where the fight or flight system is always running. Because in my experience, all of our emotional states stem from biological fear. That's where it starts from, because we've had 300,000 years in this incarnation of the way of the human body is, of survival. Hardcore, day to day, every second is survival. So it doesn't take much to trigger you to get into that survival mode. But that survival mode is 80% physical and 20% mental. And most people are like, well, I thought fear was a mental thing, not a physical thing. And that's not it. It comes from the body first, and then the brain connects in, and now you're 100% in trouble, because your whole system is now activating that. So box breathing turns off the physical piece. Then you go and journal. That's the second step. You take a minute or two just to write the story that your brain is telling you in as much detail and as honest as you can be. You write out the story that you're telling yourself, because once you get it out this way, it pulls it from the feeling part of your brain to the logic part of your brain and puts it on the page. You then go and do just a quick 2 to 3 minutes of exercise, jumping jacks, go do a power walk, go do something to redirect the adrenaline that is being created by the physical sensation of fear in your body. And then you come back and read what you wrote. And if you still believe it, on a scale of 1 to 10, if you're still like 4 or above, redo it again. Box breathe, journal, exercise, and then reread again. Because what that does is you're now attacking this fear state that your body gets locked in, stuck in probably 5, 10, 15, 20 times a day, and you don't even realize it, that it gets you to this ability to then recognize it for what it is. And so then you can stop the story before it starts. So you can stop the physiological reaction before it starts. So that way you're attacking it from the mental, the physical, and the physiological.
Thank you for sharing those tools. Very, very actionable. And box breathing and journaling, two of the most powerful tools that we have at our disposal, that are at our disposal anytime. So I always love to share those. And stories are something I'm very keen on. I've done lots of episodes on this, had other guests talk about the power of stories. And as you said, at our deepest level, humans are just storytelling machines. We are pattern recognition machines as well. Our brain is created to see patterns. So the challenge
even
then
when there
becomes,
is not, even when there is no pattern, it still can find a pattern where it doesn't even exist. And that's the thing that is the most amazing thing about us, is that we can do that. But it also is one of our Achilles heel, because we begin to, because then we think, oh, well, that person, like a very simple example, like you get an email from your boss. Hey, I want to talk to you at a meeting this afternoon. Most people, their initial reaction is, oh crap, what didn't I do? I am now in trouble. And so your body starts to pump adrenaline, because the way the body reacts to fear is, I'm dead under a bridge in a week. That's where it's going to end. And then the brain, the story in the brain, connects right into the body and says, you're right, because you screwed up on this one deadline at this one time. This one client wasn't as happy as they should have been. So it creates this feedback loop. And then you go in there and your boss says to you, hey, I just want to let you know, I think you're doing a great job. You're getting a bonus this year, all this stuff. And so all of a sudden you have this huge, massive amount of relief, but you were ready to go in there and fight for your life just because you got an email that said, I'd like to talk to you this afternoon. And it's the most common story that we have I'm going to lose everything because of something that I did.
100%. And we see this play out in a lot of different ways, but I'm curious what your advice is, because sometimes that story comes from somewhere. Like you said, it's from other people, it's from society, but often it's from our past experiences. And that story becomes, it's always been this way, so it's going to always be this way. So what advice do you have for people who are stuck in that paradigm where it's like they're using their old stories to reinforce their future ones?
Yeah. So that's one of the hardest things to break when it comes to trying to move past those blocks, because that for you, it's been replayed and replayed and reshown because your brain, because the thing is what you're talking about is self-fulfilling prophecy. If I believe it, therefore it will occur. And the problem is, some of the time the answer is yes, that will happen, because then we begin to consciously and unconsciously do the very things that will lead us to that specific outcome. So this is where the mindfulness piece comes into play. This is where whenever you're getting that big surge of feeling, whenever you're finding yourself stuck in that story, that's when you box breathe, to give yourself a moment to take a step back. That's when you pull the story out of your head and write it out. That's when you go and burn off some of that adrenaline and come back and look at it from a different angle. And that's also when you go and talk to somebody, talk to a coach, talk to a therapist, talk to a pastor, a priest, whatever you need to talk to. Tell your story to somebody else so that they can give you feedback on it and say, okay, so your story is you're worthless because you don't know enough about X subject, whatever it is. Let's say your story is you're worthless, or you're an imposter. Imposter syndrome is one of my favorite things to talk about because we all have it on some level. So let's say you feel like an imposter, but yet everything in your life shows you that you're not, but you can't see it. I've been a people pleaser and an imposter for feeling like that way for most of my life. It took me about 38 years and still occasionally now to really pull out of that. And one of the things that I learned is that the story that I was telling myself was, you don't know enough to tell somebody else what to do. And so I had to reframe that story for myself. And that's one of the things that you do through cognitive behavioral therapy is you learn about reframing. And so I had to reframe that story as, my job as a therapist is not to tell you what to do with your life. My job as a therapist is to help you figure out what you want to do that's best for you. Because just because it's best for you doesn't mean it's best for me. And that's the part that I had to remember. I had to reframe that story to pull myself out of it, because I was putting myself in this role of, I'm the expert, therefore I know everything. Here's the thing. I'm a human being just like everybody else. I don't know everything. I know a lot. I've spent the last 23 years of my life talking to 4,000 to 5,000 people of every single gender, creed, sexual orientation, addiction, mental health problem, you name it, I've seen it. I've worked in everything from maximum security prisons to HIV/AIDS to end of life care with hospice patients. So I've worked with everything. So I've got a really good, deep depth and breadth of knowledge. But that doesn't mean that I know your specific story. The only person that is an expert in you is you. So the only way anybody can help you is for you to know your story well enough to say, this is the stuff that I know is bullshit. And this is the stuff that I know is truth. And how do you figure that out? Mindfulness. You got to continuously check your story, check your story, check your story. And that's the most exhausting thing to do at the beginning of any journey, is checking that story, pretty much taking a breath before you respond to any kind of stimuli, because that's how you begin to really figure out how to take that step back and say, does this serve me? Does this serve where I'm trying to go and who I'm trying to be? And what you're going to find a lot of the time with these old stories is, no, this is the thing that's holding me back. This is the thing. This is the wall that I keep running into when there's the door literally 2 feet over and I can see the door, but for some reason I can't seem to make that little 2% correction to walk through the door.
I love all of that, and I appreciate you offering these tools again. Being able to see your story, that's what a coach, a therapist, as you said, a reverend, a priest, a rabbi, anyone will do, is just offer you a second perspective. I always tell my clients, like, my job is to just act as outside eyes and the 1,000 foot view, because when you're so in it, you're so zoomed in, you only see what you can see. And I actually borrowed this from another guest I had on the podcast years ago, but he had a 3-step story framework that I'll offer this, because you actually laid out the first 2 stories, the first 2 steps. And the first step is, what's the story that I'm telling myself right now, to see that this is a story. And the second step is, ask yourself, is this story serving me? Because often we'll ask and we'll see, like, no, this, as you just said, this is the story that's keeping me running into walls over and over and over. And then the third question is there a better story I can tell? Because to use your example of your boss's email, when you get that email, the story is, I'm going to get fired, I screwed up, I'm this, I'm that. And it's like, well, is this story serving me? No. My meeting is at 5:00. It's noon now. I can either go into a spiral for the next 5 hours, or is there a better story I can tell? And maybe that story is, since I don't know what's going to happen, maybe that story is, I'm getting a promotion, I'm getting a raise, I'm getting whatever. And that story, since neither of them are true until the thing happens, allows me to take a step back and breathe, and again, reach that place of mindfulness. So I just wanted to offer that to listeners, because that, when I heard that framework years ago, it's always stuck with me and been very powerful. But a question that I wanted to ask you, Clint, because you mentioned all of your different work experiences, the thousands of clients, over 2 decades of work as a therapist. So I'm curious if there's something that you learned throughout your, again, 20 plus years as a practicing therapist from your clients about, like, a mindset shift that you've seen play out over and over again.
Yeah. The best mindset shift that I have seen continuously is, once they begin the process of just spending 5 minutes a day being mindful in the morning. This is my practice that I do every day. I spend 5 minutes in the morning where I spend 3 minutes meditating, and then I spend 2 minutes journaling about the meditating. So I spend 5 minutes in the morning meditating. I do that again at lunchtime, and then I do that again just before bed. And the reason why I broke up that into this 15-minute a day meditation and mindfulness practice is because it gives me guardrails to move through my day, knowing that am I still tracking this thing that I really noticed that was going on with me when I woke up in the morning, or potentially the thing that was on my mind the night before I went to bed. And by doing that, that mindfulness shift, having the ability to just stop and hear what this is saying and be non-judgmental about it, because that's the key. And that's one of the hardest things to do, because we think to ourselves, well, that was a stupid thought. Why would I think that? What was the point of that? See, this is why I keep doing X, Y, Z. This is why I keep failing. This is why I keep not doing these things. We are our own worst critics. We are we get in our way more than anybody else on the planet. And when people finally get to see that, having love and compassion for yourself, giving yourself some grace, giving yourself the benefit of the doubt that you are doing the very best that you can in every situation, that you're bringing your most 100% of you. And here's the thing, sometimes my 100% is 2% of my total ability. Sometimes my 100% is 100% of my total ability. But as long as I can tell myself I gave it my 100%, no matter how I was feeling, no matter what the percentage of my actual total self was there, I did everything I could in that moment. And that's where we often get stuck the most, is when we are at our 2% because we're exhausted, we're not sleeping well, we didn't eat well, because whatever reason, because we have family stuff, all these things that are going on, and we still show up and do our best. Just because it's not the 100% of the 100% doesn't mean you did your best. And that's where we need to get out of our own ways, to give ourselves grace, recognizing that the energy management piece of our life is energy for us is not static. You can't be 100% every day. Some days you're going to be 50%. Sometimes you're going to be 2%. Sometimes you're going to be 100%. Sometimes you're going to be every variation therein. But as long as you do the best you can with what you have, how is that not being successful? And that's one of the best shifts that when I can get people to truly see that. And that takes being mindful, recognizing your story, recognizing when you're talking crap to yourself. Because I talk more crap to myself than anybody ever has in my entire life. And so recognizing that shit talking towards myself and saying, wait, why are you being so hard on yourself? Didn't you do the best you could? Yeah, but I could have. Yeah, you can always say, but I could have. Hindsight isn't 2020. Hindsight is 2010. That's the problem with it. Because you can always look back and say, oh, if I would have said this instead, or if I would have done that instead, or if I only coulda, shoulda, woulda. I love what if as the Marvel Comics thing. But when it comes to everyday life, I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. Because it's the thing that derails us most, because there's an infinite possibility of what we could have done, instead of just accepting what is and then trying to make better changes every moment forward. The thing I love most, and that I've learned through practicing meditation and all these different things for the last 23 years, because meditation and mindfulness has been a part of my life for about probably 26 years now, is I got this in my head very early on, that today is the reason why today is the most precious thing is because it's the only place where the past and future live, and we can actually begin to make that change, because the only place it lives is right now. Right now is when you can look at your past and say, this is what I've learned. And right now is only when you can look at your future and say, and this is how I'm going to apply what I've learned. And if you can figure out a way to stay here and now, you will be able to make changes in your life. But it's also recognizing that you cannot be in the now every second of every day, because everything in your brain is going to tell you, but what about that? But what about yesterday? But what about tomorrow? But what about the next 5 minutes from now? It's one of the hardest things to do. But once you begin to slip in and out of that more easily, you can then begin to make the changes that you need.
It was a masterclass right there, and self discovery and understanding the concept of sometimes my 50% is my 100%, or sometimes my 2% is 100% was game changing for me. And as you said, we have natural ebbs and flows in our energy. So I think that's a great point for people to take away. And I'd like to ask though, being that you've been so, again, in the mental health world for so long, what are some common misconceptions about mental health or mental health care that you
Sure.
wish that you could disperse with?
Oh man, I don't know if we have a long enough podcast for that. That might be a whole different episode. But that's at the top of my head is that mental health is not you being weak. It is not a you problem. It is a behavioral process problem. And you are not your behaviors. That's the thing that is the hardest thing for people to understand, because when I do something wrong, for a lot of my life, I looked at, well, I'm bad because I did this thing. But I'm not the thing that I did. That was a result of choices that I made. And so it's really recognizing that therapy doesn't have to be, life coaching doesn't have to be because everything is falling apart and because life is miserable. Sometimes it's good to just have it as something to give you that outside perspective, to give you that little 1 to 2% perception shift, because psychologically speaking, studies have shown that if you have a 1 to 2% perception shift about an idea, that will completely change the entire trajectory of where you go from that moment forward. Because it's one of those things that it's like the magic eye picture. Once you see the picture within the magic eye picture, you can't unsee the picture. It now automatically clicks into place. And that's the same with us. The moment we begin to recognize that magic eye picture of us going, that's the thing that I do that always derails me moving when I try and do this thing. Once you see that, you then can't help but want to act on it, because we as human beings are not built to stay within the muck. We want to move past it. We don't want to be in it. But then the story says, yeah, but you've tried it before, and so you're going to fail again. Well, okay, that could be. But are you talking to other people about it, or are you keeping it to yourself? Because most often than not, the thing that we fear the most when we talk to somebody we trust and they give us a different perspective makes us go, oh, wow, I have been looking at that all wrong. Why did I think that about myself when this person who knows me just as well, probably better in some ways, can say that about me? Because we are, again, our own harshest critic. We are the thing that gets stuck in the pain, that gets stuck in that tar baby of fear and anxiety and self-doubt that we can't push through, because we're afraid that if we push through it, well, what's next? And that's one of the crazy things that I see in therapy and in life coaching, is that sometimes we stay stuck where we are because we're so afraid of not knowing what it's going to look like after, that we decide to just stay stuck because it's easy, because it's familiar. Because that's what fear is. Fear is, I don't know. That's all fear is. But once you get past the I don't know and you see what it is, most of the time it's just this huge weight off your shoulders and this ability to just finally breathe and go, wow, I was the person that was holding myself back. And once you are able to get out of your own way by recognizing what's going on, by being mindful about how you're thinking, by checking all of the stories that your brain is telling you, and by taking control of your body, because if you can take control of this 80%, which is your body, if you can just box breathe every day. Box breathing is the thing that I hear from all of my clients. After I started doing that, every time I started feeling any kind of heavier emotion, it changed my life, because I didn't go into the fear, shame, guilt spiral.
Yeah, it's amazing. And again, so many little tidbits that I can pull on, so many strings. I think the most important takeaway from that is about safety and staying where we are. familiarity. I think that a big mistake is that we confuse familiarity with safety because, as you said, fear is the unknown. So then we assume that what is known is then somehow safe. But that's a logical fallacy because often where we are is unsafe because we are being unhealthy, because we are not doing the things that we need to do, because we are staying with bad habits simply because they are familiar, which feels safe. But we have to get out of that thought pattern and realize that yes, the unknown is scary, but sometimes staying where you are is just as scary too. So change is scary, but that's okay. It's supposed to be. So I really appreciate you offering that up to us, Clinton. The last question that I have is the same question that I ask all my guests, and you've already given us a ton of different actions, and you can use one again that you've already mentioned, or you can feel free to offer a new one. But my question is, if you had one action step to leave listeners with right now today, as soon as this episode ends, as soon as they take their headphones out to start living a happier, healthier life, what would it be?
Take 5 minutes. Take 3 minutes to sit and just sit with yourself. Just sit. Just let whatever flows through your brain flow through your brain. Just sit and just focus on your breathing for 3 minutes. Set a timer. See what keeps coming up. And then write it out. Then go do something else and come back later that night and read it and see if you still agree with it. Because most often, when we pull the emotions and we pull the story out of our brain and we see it later on after living our day and going through things, we look at it and we ask ourselves, how could I ever believe that? That is one of the most important things that I can say, because it's the thing that has changed my life in many different ways. Because every time I do that, I laugh now because I'm like, really? That old story again? Really? It's that one again? Wow. I thought I got rid of you, but I guess not. And that's the thing. You'll see repeating patterns again and again. And once you recognize the pattern, you can then begin to finally break the pattern. And the only way to break a pattern is to say, this is my pattern, is to accept it and then to move through it.
How do you climb a mountain? One step at a time. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And how do you become the person who finishes the year achieving your goals rather than like the 99% of people who don't? You take it one day at a time. The simple tactics laid out in this episode, like box breathing or the 5-minute meditation and journaling practice that Clint suggested, can help you get out of an emotional state and give you the opportunity to make decisions with clarity so you can stick to your goals and keep working towards them. That's the type of person who achieves their goal not for a month, not for a year, but forever. That is change made easy. If you're really passionate about making this change stick, then I just have to remind you about my free weekly newsletter. Don't miss out on joining the thousands of change seekers just like you who get a curated list each week of 5 educational, informative, and inspiring pieces of content that will help you on your quest for change. Go to the notes of whatever app you're listening on and click the link that says free newsletter now. And you'll be signed up to get free tips sent straight to your inbox every Friday that will help make your change journey easier. All you have to do is click free newsletter right now. Go to that link, and I'll see you back here every Tuesday and Thursday for new episodes of Change Made Easy.